Well, welcome to Chapter 7, Part 3, our last segment. And the big ideas here include animal communication, intelligence and the G factor, the triarchic theory of intelligence, and intelligence testing with the Stanford Binet. So let's shift gears now and go on to the fascinating question, do animals have language? Well, some animals can definitely communicate within their species, can't they? Dolphins signal direction to one another through whistles, clicks, and grunts. Prairie dogs are thought to have a complex social system and use many different barks to convey messages. By the way, those of you here in town, we have quite the prairie dog community across the street and down the road at University of Southwest. When you come onto campus, you frequently see the prairie dogs all over the place, and they're barking messages to one another. Bees do elaborate dances in the air to tell the others where the honey is. But does any of this really rise to the level of language? Communication, yes. Language, well, remember that language is richly complex. It has a lot of elements, a few of which I went over with you in the previous segment. Most psychologists, myself included, believe that animal communication, as impressive as it is, don't get me wrong, we're not minimizing that, but does not meet the criteria for what we commonly call language. But that said, can we teach animals to communicate with us? Can we even teach them maybe the beginnings of language? Scientists and researchers have been trying to do this with chimps and apes since the 1930s. The all-time champion of interspecies communication with humans is a bonobo ape named Kanzi, and this is the image of Kanzi. Kanzi has been taught to communicate using a special symbol board, and on the left, this is his primary researcher, Sue Savage Rambaugh, who has worked with Kanzi for decades. And Kanzi has been recorded making thousands of utterances. Now, I want to emphasize he doesn't vocally talk when we say utterance. We're talking about he has created apparently some sentences and communicating that way. He's also been trained to respond to specific human speech requests made over earphones. They can put him in a room with nobody else, just with the earphones, and he will respond that way. Kanzi is alive and well at the Great Ape Trust in Des Moines, Iowa, and the research continues, and it's fascinating to me. We'll see what happens. Although there are critics, there are criticisms leveled at this research, and you can read more about that in the chapter. The last big area, what is intelligence? If I convened a blue ribbon panel of psychologists and put them up on stage and asked them to give us their definition of intelligence, we would get many different responses, and I don't think anybody would agree. Our book defines it as the ability to understand complex ideas and the capacity to adapt to the environment. And I especially like the last part, the adapting to your environment. How quickly can you pick up that things are new and different and go with it? I really favor that part of a definition. Does intelligence have an underlying general factor, or are there several independent forms of intelligence? This is a big question. And psychologists have researched this for over 100 years, and this debate is not going to end anytime soon, folks. In fact, we have swung back and forth like a pendulum, but the G factor view has been predominant. And that's the view that there is an underlying general factor in intelligence ability, so that people who are smart in one area are usually smart in other areas. However, models of specific types of intelligence have become more popular recently, including the triarchic theory of intelligence, Robert Sternberg, pictured here, he is the chief architect of this theory, and he proposes 3 independent forms of intelligence: analytical, creative, and practical. I'm going to go over each one, give you some examples. The analytical component highlights formal academic knowledge. I like to call this the ability to learn what is already known. We nickname it book smarts. A person with very high analytical intelligence is probably near the top of her class with a high GPA. You probably score well on IQ tests, and you probably have quite a few choices on where to go to college because they're offering you big-time scholarships. The creative component highlights creative thinking and problem solving. I like to think of this as the ability to learn what is not known, and it's nicknamed creative smarts. A person with very high creative intelligence may not be at the top of their class with good grades, but they can think outside the box. You probably like to figure out how to do things better, faster, and deal with the unexpected. The practical component of intelligence highlights common sense and street smarts. I like to think of this as the ability to get things done one way or the other. And isn't this a beautiful picture here in the ants? A person with very high practical intelligence may not have done well in school, but has good social skills and can read people. You probably know your strengths and weaknesses and adapt well to the environment. But no matter how we define intelligence, we psychologists have been trying to measure this for many years. The first useful intelligence test was developed by Alfred Binet, pictured here, in 1905 Paris, France. And this was developed to solve a practical problem of where to place school children based on their educational ability. Mandatory education had become popular, and child labor laws were enacted preventing children from working full-time, and some were taken off the street or out of the factories and put into a classroom maybe for the first time in their life. Binet devised a series of 30 tasks, and he arranged them in difficulty level from easiest to hardest, and then classified these children according to their mental age, or MA. I'm going to be saying MA going forward. And he knew what tasks could be passed by average children at each age. For example, a 7-year-old child who could pass all the tasks usually passed by 7-year-olds but nothing beyond would have a mental age of 7. A child who could not pass the tasks expected for children his age would earn a mental age below his chronological age, and if it was significantly lower, this might warrant placement in special education. His test was called the Binet-Simon. The Binet-Simon was quickly brought to the United States and translated into English. A psychologist named Louis Terman renormed the test on American children at Stanford University in California, and this new test was called the Stanford Binet. Terman popularized the intelligence quotient, known in shorthand as the IQ, as a means to classify children's intellectual abilities. The formula was really quite simple. Mental age divided by chronological age times 100 equals the IQ. So in this way, using the formula, a child with a mental age of 8 and a chronological age of 8 would have an IQ of, what would the IQ be? That's right, it would be 100. The use of the Stanford Binet IQ allowed educators to compare intellectual ability among different age children much easier than with the original Binet-Simon. The Stanford Binet is now in its 5th revision and remains one of the most popular IQ tests. I have given many Stanford Binets in my career. Well, that's all, folks. That's all on Chapter 7. I'll see you next time in Chapter 8. Take care.